The Mandela Effect is taking the internet by storm. If you haven't heard of it, it is a so-called phenomenon which an individual claims to have a clear memory of an object, event, or person, while the facts reflect otherwise. The Mandela Effect believer chalks this up to alternate or parallel realities, invoking silly theoretical pseudoscience. The memory or claim is collective, which means a good number of people recount the same thing. The namesake comes from the believers proposing Nelson Mandela died in prison in the late 1980s. Apart from opposing the idea itself, I strongly dislike the name of this so-called effect. I think it is a misnomer and is misleading. For me, Mindelude Effect would be much more fitting. I would like to remove the shroud of paranormal thinking and metaphysical pontification. I will go through a brief philosophical sequence first to show the idea, consequently by association the pseudoscience it is born out of, is not only ridiculous but impossible. I feel that presenting this perspective changes the tone by which Mandela Effect has been approached thus far. This world has turned Hollywood, and unfortunately in certain countries especially so. We've taken our disappointments, indulgences, apathy, and boredom and have dressed them in new clothing. By my thinking, one can interpret Mandela Effect differently by reading between the lines. The Mandela Effect means an individual would have to concede to the fact they are wrong. They would have to admit the mind is tricky and we have less control of it than we think. They have to accept that memory too is deceptive and open to many influences. A great working memory is no exception from error if what it assumes to be true is misinformation. The Mandela Effect means one creates an unreasonable, intricate belief, an explanation rather than accepting the logical, simpler one. This so-called phenomenon ushers in a special and privileged position in the universe while disengaging reality and the fact of reality of others, eventually to the point of delusion. Confirmed solipsism flexing its muscles. The extent to which I recognize the Mandela Effect regarding its reality is psychological, coupled with inherent mechanisms of perceptual error. Since I ultimately perceive everything as physical, however, the so-called psychological effect can eventually lead to a physical impression. Practically speaking, Mandela Effect is a surrogate for what used to be, "Oh, I messed up, I was wrong." One shifts the blame simply because of the assumption that since many people are having the same mismemory, it can't be about the internal, it must be the external, that reality has been profoundly disturbed. Some debunking articles or comments in good effort try to explain away Mandela Effect, mostly by engaging in memory feuds or acknowledging countering evidence. I'm offering my perspective in a different way, not by simply speculating on what the factors are that contribute to the illusion, but that it cannot possibly be true. With an analysis of a few alleged examples, I will offer a perspective aimed to debunk it on a real, tangible level rather than solely with memory or opposing speculation. The interesting show Brain Games comes to mind when thinking of the many ways our perception of things is so easily duped. The Mandela Effect is a truth claim, but very much based on the trickiness of perception and memory. That's why it is funny to me that most of the examples of Mandela Effect usually revolve around inconsequential, iconic pop culture, a hodgepodge of long, less inspecting errors such as pre-internet errors and misinformation filtered through the apparatus constantly at the mercy of deceit, namely the human brain. It wasn't too long ago when Orson Welles supposedly incited panic in people, and from that, having believed what they were hearing on the radio, people fabricated experiences, scents, and visuals. This was all based on a suggestive narrative. As it turned out, even this supposed story was actually made up, creating a suggestive narrative for the suggestive narrative. Suggestibility, however, still abound in combination with misinformation. Either way, they believed it, or we believe they believed it.